This is the Project Dynamix podcast, hosted by Brian Chastain, where he features top leaders in the energy markets to talk about innovation and impact.
Hi, Brian Chastain here, host of Project Dynamix podcast, where I feature top leaders in the energy markets to talk about innovation and impact. I have Dr. Jeremy Wise here at Rise 25, who has done thousands of interviews with successful entrepreneurs and CEOs. When we have flipped the script, he will be interviewing me.
Brian, I'm excited. And especially, we're going to be talking about, you've had some crazy stories in your, in this industry, and some of the things that you've seen third hand, second hand, and first hand as well. And some of the horror stories that have happened. And so we're going to run through those. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Dynamix. And at Dynamix, you make sure companies you work with do not make the news. That's important, because I know you were telling me about an article where a company got a $53 million fine. And basically, if you're in the gas storage, utility services, energy industry, you are a turnkey project management operation, and you fix, update, repurpose assets like wellheads, casing, production tubing, site repair and replace. And you bring clients not just to the industry standards, but above the industry standards. And, basically your engineering and services group are on a mission to help companies achieve peak operational efficiencies with the smallest environmental footprint. So you have a team of experts who have been in the field for over 45 years. And I know people can email you at info@dynamixesg.com or give you all a call at 724-716-4111. So I want to start with that one. The $53 million fine.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, the short and dirty of it is that they had an equipment failure due to years of poor maintenance or no maintenance. In that case, there was valves, and without going into try to dodge some of those details, but really, what it boiled down to is their maintenance program was insufficient. They had multiple failures, and really that's what all of these led up to. That it wasn't just one thing broke and then there was a problem. It started all the way back, as far as sometimes it wasn't being properly regulated within the company, and sometimes it was the federal administration played a part where they just didn't have their rules set stringent enough to where the safety bar wasn't maybe as high as what it could have been. So then that led to another step. In this case, the failure started from the lack of proper maintenance. The proper maintenance, because it was not there, the employees of that company were not doing regular inspections, and the inspections that were getting done, they didn't come up to snuff. They really just, I don't want to say pencil whipping it, but I mean, it was close, right? When you have incidents of, you don't have someone leading that charge of saying, hey, safety first every single day. And really that's what we're after when we say don't make the news. We just want to drive safety for the environment and safety for the community in which your company and the public reside. So with that situation, it wasn't being properly maintained. The inspections weren't getting done. A valve failed, which turned into another failure down the line that ultimately resulted in a small explosion. And after multiple investigations, it led back in that specific company was fined about $53 million, which to a lot of these companies, $53 million is, well, in no way is that a small number, right? I mean, nobody wants to have a $53 million fine. I think the most important piece that came out of that wasn't the fine at all. The monetary damage is one aspect. The public damage that you end up with, that's the real nightmare, because now you've broken a trust bridge between you and the public that you're supposed to be serving. So as we go and we try to build and expand infrastructures, and people want to promote the safety of pipeline infrastructure, what ends up happening is examples like this is it comes to straight to the top of the plate. That's all anybody thinks about. It's like, oh, well, what about that one explosion that you didn't really, you dropped the ball, nothing happened. That's the real blowback. In that incident, there was no casualties. It was infrastructure, and there was external damage. But luckily, in that specific incident, no one was actually there was no fatalities or anything. And that's just lucky. That I mean, the wrong time, wrong place. That incident could have been a lot worse, really. And it started by not properly inspecting the equipment, and it ultimately led to equipment not being properly restricted to the public. In fact, that's where a lot of these incidents boil back to is improper access control from personnel that does not need to be near there.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of those scenarios. That's actually the scarier part for me when you tell the story is it wasn't anything crazy. It just it was a trickle effect of small things that led to larger and larger things. And those small things don't seem that significant at the time. So it's like, oh, no big deal, but that can lead to huge problems. You talked about the public for a second. There's a couple scenarios where this has affected people, or could. There was an incident, I think, with campers.
Yeah. So there was an incident. This would have been probably, I don't know, as long as maybe up to 20 years ago, plus or minus, maybe closer to 15. It's been a while, but it's Southern California. They had just a group of young adults, teenagers that went camping, except they went camping next to a surface valve in Southern California. That did result in an explosion, and it did result in some. Well, I mean, it didn't go over well for the public or the general safety of anything. And I think that was one of the pivot moments in our industry, pushing really towards the regulatory infrastructure that's being built around these. Is you can't have. At no point should the public be able to just go strike up a campfire near a surface valve. Now, of course, most people, especially, I think this is almost kind of a complacency thing in some instances, where we assume, and by we, I mean the broader industry, right? Not we, but sometimes people get caught assuming that the general public will just recognize and know that they should not be near something, right? Everybody makes attempts. It is properly marked, and it's properly, it would be painted different colors. There's signs that says warning, gas line, gas valve, or underground. There's an abundance of things. But the old adage of where there's a will, there's a way kind of a deal. Sometimes that leads into a situation like this. Well, one of the things that happens when lines come through is they clear off a right of way, right? So it becomes a nice open clearing through whatever portion of the country that those lines may be going to, which is, of course, pretty appealing if you're looking for a nice, level, clean spot to go set up for the night. And in that case, in that story, and again, it was really just I don't recall exactly how it completely boiled down, but I know that it was avoidable. And I know that really started sparking a lot of the regulation and enforcement of proper inspections and proper access to these things.
Is that the issue, Brian? Is the proper signage and everything was not there? It wasn't a case where they jumped the fence and they decided to, have a bonfire camp, right?
Well, it isn't even, look, everyone, or most everyone's going to know that a fence doesn't keep people, right? So I feel that it's a lack of proper education, right? A lot of people, it's no different than if you put up a no trespassing sign and a nice fence around your personal property. Well, we all know that that's not going to keep people out. It will to an extent, right? But if somebody really just wants to go and they really like where you're at, I mean, that's a really nice piece of land you've got. I sure would like to camp there for the night, and it's out here in the wilderness, so I'm going to do what I want to do. We can't stop that. Now, because our industry is in some lights viewed as more taboo, right? It's the dirty energy industry. Well, that's one of our goals. That's one of the things that I hope to accomplish with this podcast and with building this company. We're trying to fix some of the sins of the past and the mistakes that were made, because it's a learning process. As the industry has evolved, we have learned safer and better ways to interact with the public, safer and more economical and environmentally friendly ways to interact with our general surroundings that everyone wants to protect, right? I don't want to be 90 years old one day talking to my great grandkid and know that I could have stopped something by just putting my best foot forward every single day and examining the possibilities. I think that a lot of times interacting with the public in which you are going to cross over with a pipeline or a well or any type of energy, or really even outside of the industry, this could be windmills on the renewable side, right? You have to properly educate the community that you're going to interact with, so that parents can help teach their children the importance of whatever infrastructure may be there and how to appropriately either go near it or don't go near it. We camp here, we don't camp here. I really think that's what it boils down to. I don't think a sign or placards could have stopped, really, ultimately, right? I think that signs and placards and proper labeling go a long way because, generally speaking, it helps, right? It does keep the vast majority of people out. But to just blanket statement, if there was a fence there, it wouldn't have happened. I would argue that if there was a fence there and someone didn't know the dangers of starting a fire next to a surface valve, well, then that fence wouldn't have stopped anything.
And you mentioned there's a couple people, campers have been close to these sites. Also, other people doing interesting things. What are some of the other things that you've seen?
Yeah, so I mean, ironically, right, we're going to shift away from me saying that a fence wouldn't have stopped anything. Well, there's a couple of cases where proper signage and fencing would stop some things, right? I had a gentleman, one of a previous client, they were telling us, we came out to go do some site access and some security updates for one of their locations not too long ago. And the purpose for coming out there to do it is because of where the wellheads were located and because of where the lines were, it was off in the woods, which was also conveniently located to, some of the locals were able to gain access, and they came out there with their dirt bikes and their quads and pretty much set up a ramp over the top of the settlement. And they were using it as an obstacle course, jumping wellheads with dirt bikes. Now that is very much a case. I mean, don't get me wrong. Again, will and way, right? Because they could have showed up with bolt cutters, but most children and teenagers and young adults they're not typically riding around on their dirt bikes with bolt cutters to go jump fences. So I definitely think that in that instance, we were able to put up Jersey barriers, proper signage, and get better site access, taking control for that specific area to eliminate that risk. Because that's, again, you want to talk about the potential of a total catastrophe. You've now got a combustion engine, people jumping your equipment. That's probably, I think it's both. The fence totally would have stopped and has stopped. We have checked up. It did stop the incidents, but I think potentially properly educating the community at the same time would have gone a long way as well, because people don't generally want to put their lives in danger.
And Brian, talking about, yes, it could have human catastrophes, but also environmental. And there was a case that affected environmental. I think there was a large body of water, river.
Yeah. So there was, again, that one's going to go back to improper maintenance and inspections. There was a rupture below a river not too long back. It's been years, but in the big scheme, right? It's not too long ago where there was a pipeline that ruptured underneath a river, and honestly, a pretty important one, right? So all rivers are important in my mind. Those incidents are really it's one of the things that I feel are easier to control, because fish aren't going to be jumping your pipeline with dirt bikes, right? So properly maintaining your infrastructure when you're crossing or going underneath bodies of water or through affected areas, really, again, go back to the public view. If you want your company to view you and your proposed plan, your proposed infrastructure, your proposed safer means of transportation, then you need to be very mindful. I used to think when I was much younger that it was a little bit over avoided in some cases, where they would reroute complete pipelines and move plans and all these other things. But really, I mean, the older I get and the longer I spend within this industry, the more I think, okay, well, we very much could and should evaluate the potential impact and do whatever it takes to limit those impacts towards the environment. I mean, a pipeline rupturing underneath a river, just due to kind of that same trickle effect, where one piece led to another piece that led to an overpressuring of a line. Those things, we are, as an industry, we're getting a lot better at Dynamix. What we're trying to do is promote that, the proactive approach, right? This isn't there are so many companies. I mean, we work for one right now that they are years in the future as far as being proactive. So no way is this a slam to the industry. This is learning lessons. These are experiences that could have been avoided. And now us at Dynamix, we are trying to further that proactivity with our clients. We want to go out and do site evaluations, and we want to go help our clients not make the news. And honestly, whether or not you make the news or not, I want to help our clients, help our communities be better stewards of the land that we are occupying while we are there. There have been multiple incidents. There was another one, again, very public incident that resulted in another explosion that was, it was outdated and under maintained equipment. It resulted in just tens of millions, over $100 million fines. And there was casualties and injuries, and it was extremely public, and it was extremely bad for the families involved, and for the company. It was arguably almost unrecoverable. And at the end of the day, someone's kid didn't go home to their parents, right? And whether or not there's a catastrophe or not, those are things that I want to consider when our employees go out. Are you okay allowing your children to go play in that neighborhood, right? Would you feel safe if you were a farmer planning your life, planning all of your agriculture, your harvest? I mean, are you going to be okay right? Can you sustain? Because people don't put wellheads in parking lots most of the time. There's a few of them. Most of the time, these things are out in agriculture and in the wilderness, in the woods, in the hills, in the mountains, out of sight, out of mind. But then there's always an impact somewhere. So that's what we're really trying to avoid with these nightmares, right? This would be the ultimate of failure in process.
Brian, tell me, kind of what you just said is how do we avoid these things? What are some of the things what does proactivity look like?
Proactivity looks like knowing what you have. We have encountered some clients in our that we interact with, and honestly, potential clients and people that we just interact with, right? So let's just not even clients. As a whole, the other companies that we interact with within this industry, proactivity looks like the forward enough thought to say, we know that we have these assets within our company. Okay. We know that this is not a set it and forget it industry that we live in. We know that the industry and the regulations in which we operate are constantly evolving, changing, and in most cases, it is generally speaking for the better. Proactivity looks like picking up the phone, whether or not you call Dynamix or any other engineering and services firm out there. There are plenty of other companies that will do kind of evaluation services for you. That's proactivity. What we try to do is if you call us for one job and we're on your location, our employees are trained from day one. If you see something, you say something. Well, that's not just see something, say something within our company. It's see something, say something to our clients. This isn't about upselling the client. This is, hey, we noticed it. We have an obligation within our company to see something and say something. And if at all possible, we try to fix it as soon as possible. We document it. We take pictures, A to Z. We're not just not our job kind of employee base here. Everyone likes to go and make sure that if we see something, we inform our internals and our clients or potential clients, because we will come do evaluations whether or not we work for you permanently.
Brian, it's always fascinating to hear what is happening out there and what the dangers are that, again, like you said, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And these areas aren't always in frequented places. So thanks for everything you do. I want to just point people to more episodes of the podcast, and people can check out and learn more at Dynamix ESG. That's DYNAMIX ESG.com. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Project Dynamix podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.